Hello, welcome everyone to the May 30th, 2025 big, beautiful episode of On Iowa Politics. This week on the podcast, we're all about that big, beautiful bill, and more specifically, how Iowa's Republican congressional delegation is talking about it, and we consider our own mortality. Hello, everyone. I'm Erin Murphy, the Des Moines Bureau Chief for the Gazette in Cedar Rapids. With me this week are Gazette Deputy Bureau Chief Tom Barton. Hello, Tom.
Howdy.
Lead Des Moines Bureau Chief Maya Marchel Hoff is here. Hello, Maya.
Happy Friday, Erin.
Thank you. It is a happy Friday indeed. Sarah Watson of the Quad City Times is with us. Hello, Sarah.
Greetings, Erin.
And it's amazing that we can get this team together, given this is a unusually busy Friday. It feels like a lot going on and a lot to talk about. So let's get right to it. This week, kind of all of our discussion blocks tie together. Again, it's all about that big, beautiful bill, legislation passed by U.S. House Republicans that includes tax and immigration policy, healthcare spending reductions, and more. Our team covered a bunch of live events this week that all have ties back to that bill and that discussion. So let's have a big, beautiful discussion. Maya, I want to start with you because you're coming in with the freshest news. As I said, we're recording here on Friday afternoon. Just earlier this morning, you covered Iowa Republican U.S. Senator Joni Ernst's first town hall of 2025. And one particular comment that Senator Ernst made there seems to have gotten a lot of attention. And actually, before we go to Maya, being the outstanding reporter that she is, got a video of the comment that I'm going to ask her to talk about, and let's play it for you all first.
So, people are not, well, we all are going to die.
You're so kind and passionate.
For heaven's sakes, folks. Okay, no, but what you don't want to do is listen to me when I say that we are going to focus on those that are most vulnerable. Those that meet the eligibility requirements for Medicaid, we will protect. We will protect them. Okay? Medicaid is extremely important here in the state of Iowa. If you don't want to listen, that's fine. But what I'm doing is going through and telling you that those that are not eligible, those that are working and have opportunity for benefits elsewhere, then they should receive those benefits elsewhere and leave those dollars for those that are eligible for Medicaid. SNAP overpayments that the states have been making will need to stop. Okay? No, it's not a lie because I've worked on it. It's bipartisan. Can you tell everybody else in the Senate that what we're doing is wrong? Democrats, Republicans, and independents.
All right, Maya, that one exploded online. Tell us about what you heard there in the room and what you've been hearing from the political world ever since.
Yeah, so just to start off, a lot of conversations at the town hall was held in a high school in Parkersburg, Iowa, which is about 30 minutes west of Waterloo, Cedar Falls area. A lot of folks, about a crowd of 100 people, were asking Senator Ernst questions about the big, beautiful bill and what comes with it, including spending cuts to federal programs like Medicaid and SNAP. A lot of folks were expressing concern about that. And during this one question where this one attendee was expanding on all of the different impacts of that and how she was concerned about that, Ernst started answering that. During her answer, which this happened during a lot of other answers during the town hall, the crowd was kind of heckling her, yelling back, and talking over her while she was speaking. And that was also happening during this question. So she was answering about how the Medicaid cuts aren't going to actually cut people off of Medicaid. They're only implementing work requirements. So those that don't meet the eligibility requirements for Medicaid aren't receiving benefits, and it won't impact the vulnerable. So she was saying that, and then someone in the crowd yelled out, people will die. And she was kind of, she tried to quickly respond to that and said, we are all going to die. And that in that town hall, I mean, in that moment, the crowd started, heckling her again and jeering, and kind of there was an outburst in the crowd, and people were kind of struck that she had said that. And I had been in the town hall for a while, and then I came out, and then I went on a drive 30 minutes west, so I didn't know that everything was exploding. But apparently, that clip went viral on social media, and people are running with it in a bunch of different ways, especially Democrats, criticizing her for saying that about folks that could be impacted by the federal spending bill.
Yeah, I have a feeling we're going to see that in campaign ads, assuming Senator Ernst decides to run for re-election at the end of her term next year. Maya, I'm going to come back to you to talk more about the town hall more broadly, but on this topic specifically, Senator Ernst also was at another event later in the day in Cedar Rapids, not a political event, a Google data center thing in Cedar Rapids. And she was asked in a gaggle, at this point, the comments, as we talked about, as we have established, had kind of caught fire. She was asked if she wanted to clarify them. And she had a response to that, and we have that as well. And we're going to play that right now.
I was wondering if you wanted to respond to the reaction to your comments during the town hall earlier this morning about Medicaid that's kind of generated a frenzy on social media.
Oh gosh, yes. And this is the hysteria that's out there coming from the left. And we're not talking about decreasing benefits for those on Medicaid. We know two things are true: death and taxes. And what I'm trying to do is make sure that we are extending tax benefits for hardworking Iowans, and that we're preserving Medicaid for those that meet eligibility requirements. We don't need to see illegal immigrants receiving benefits that should be going to Iowans. So again, trying to do our best to make sure that our Iowans get the best, which means extending the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and making sure that those that are eligible for Medicaid are receiving those Medicaid benefits.
So that was Senator Ernst's response. Maya, I guess that just kind of falls in line, sort of, as I hear that, with the overall argument, right? Am I right that Republicans are making about the bill? And does your gut tell you about whether that does anything to slow the fire that has spread throughout Friday?
That's a great question. I'm not sure. She definitely didn't back away from what she said. She, in fact, maybe more so doubled down. She called the buzz around it hysteria, especially from Democrats who are criticizing the budget reconciliation. She just kind of hit on points that she made after she made the initial comment, is that she wants Medicaid benefits going to the most vulnerable. She wants it going to Iowans, and she said she doesn't want it going to illegal immigrants. So those are just kind of the points that she re-hit on again.
Yep. Real quick, because I don't want to spend too much time on this, Maya, but be remiss if we didn't talk about the town hall more. Generally speaking, too, we've talked about some of these earlier this year with Senator Grassley. You've mentioned it a couple times that it did get a little heated, raucous. There was heckling. Kind of give us the general tone of what you saw at the Applington Parkersburg gymnasium there.
Yeah, it was actually in the auditorium, but
I'm sorry, thank you.
I wasn't at the Representative Ashley Hinson town halls earlier this week, but from what I could tell, she received a mixed reaction from the crowd. I feel like that's kind of what this town hall was. It wasn't as explosive as town halls held by Senator Grassley earlier in the year. It started out pretty quiet. It was 7:30. I feel like people were still kind of sleepy. Some of her answers received applause from part of the audience, and then as the town hall kind of went on, and as more questions were asked about the big beautiful bill and Medicaid cuts, people got a little bit more energetic, and people started feeling more comfortable to shout and heckle her. So by the end, there was every answer pretty much. People were speaking over her and yelling over her and yelling liar and all those things. So, but again, there were folks that agreed with her in the audience, and then that did not agree with her.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about a couple of House members that had public events this week. Sarah, I'm going to come to you next. You were among the reporters who talked to Eastern Iowa Republican Congresswoman Marionette Miller Meeks, who had alongside her Ohio Republican Congressman Jim Jordan after a fundraiser for Miller Meeks. The big beautiful bill came up. What did Miller Meeks have to say about it?
Yeah, so she defended her vote about that. At the same time, outside, there were some protesters who held signs that said things like "hands off Medicaid," and in support of Medicaid in protest of the budget reconciliation. And so she was asked about that, like some of those protesters' concerns about reductions in spending on Medicaid, and so she said that she defended it as they were voting to preserve and strengthen Medicaid, and that the trajectory of Medicaid spending was unsustainable. And again, like Maya said with Joni Ernst, repeating these l- um, the argument that these are common sense reforms, that these are work requirements for able-bodied adults, and that line of that these are young men in their mom's basements that are not working and choosing not to go to school or engage in the community, and on Medicaid. So that's the line that she was saying. And so yeah, she said if they're not doing some community engagement, they may lose coverage, but that's their choice to lose coverage. And
Yeah, and
so
that's the one. Sorry, I was just going to say, Sarah, because that's nowhere near what happened with Senator Ernst's comment today. But that seemed to be the quote that opponents, Democrats, picked up on from Miller Meeks. The if they're at that point, if they're losing their benefits, they're choosing to lose it. Right? That's the one that I saw people trying to hit Miller Meeks on.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And yeah, and I guess just a note, like the Congressional Budget Office estimates that about 10 million Americans could lose Medicaid coverage under the bill as it's currently written, and it's estimated to reduce spending by 600 some billion over 10 years. And yeah, and Jim Jordan, he really emphasized some of the other parts of the bill. So reauthorization of the tax cuts, saying that that's if they hadn't done that, that would have resulted in a tax increase on Americans and Iowans, allocating resources to border security, and the creation of a federal tax credit for people who donate to groups that provide scholarships private school expenses. And so he really touted that as a conservative bill that they wanted to pass. It was a really short media event. They didn't allow media into the actual like fundraising event, so this is only about 7 minutes, I think, with media.
Yeah.
So that was all we had the time to cover. I tried to ask a question about concerns about the deficit and spending that others like Elon Musk have brought up, but they were kind of wrapping up, and they kind of ignored me and left. But
I know that question. Trying to sneak the Columbo one last
yeah,
question in, and they didn't go for it.
no.
Appreciate the effort. Good try, Sarah. All right, Tom, let's come to you now. Eastern Iowa Republican Congresswoman Ashley Hinson talked about this during her weekly conference call with Iowa reporters, of which you were a part, and that was a day after her town hall in Elkader. She didn't have a viral moment, as far as I'm familiar with her, so I guess Ashley Hinson wins the unscathed Iowa Republican award for the week. What did Hinson say about the big beautiful bill, Tom?
Yeah, Hinson said largely what Sarah Watson said about the response from Marionette Miller Meeks, that the intention with the changes to the Medicaid program are to protect it for vulnerable Iowans, to rein it back to only include, again, those Iowans who truly need it, and the people that they argue the Medicaid program was intended for, and not the 29-year-old living in their mother's basement playing video games, and argued again that these are common sense reforms requiring, again, able-bodied Medicaid recipients who are between 19 and 64 years of age to require them that they either have to work or be going to school, or engaging in community service, and saying that there are, again, what she termed to be common sense exemptions. There are exemptions for people who are taking care of children, who are taking care of dependents with disabilities, who are medically frail or are deemed disabled by the Social Security Administration. Critics, opponents, Democrats hit back, arguing that work requirements that have been tried in other states, namely Arkansas and Georgia, those states' experience with Medicaid work requirements show that they just create a administrative barrier and red tape that push people who are otherwise eligible for Medicaid off of the rolls. And that, again, those states' experience with Medicaid work requirements, showed that it ended up being costly to implement, to manage and administer, and that in the end, didn't end up saving a lot of money, and also didn't noticeably boost or increase workforce participation rates, and conversely instead drove up the number of uninsured people in the state. That because of the reporting requirements, that people saw that as just kind of an administrative barrier or hurdle that they had to jump over, and instead of doing that, essentially just gave up and ended up losing their insurance. And then she also said that the intent here is to, and we hear this time and time again, to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. And by doing that, the savings that would come from that can be reinvested into these programs again, to make sure that they are sustained and maintained, and that benefits are not cut or reduced again for vulnerable Iowans, for those who they say are truly in need of these social safety net programs.
And then, not directly related to the Iowa delegation anyways, but this week also another congressional Republican was in Iowa, U.S. Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky, who spoke at a state party fundraiser in Cedar Rapids that you covered. Tom, what did he also address? I believe, if I remember from your story right, he talked about the big beautiful bill, but said it didn't go far enough. Is that right?
That's correct. He didn't talk. He talked a little bit about changes to Medicaid, and other so-called entitlement programs, but he focused more on the spending cuts outlined in the bill, calling them wimpy and anemic. He said that he favors making the 2017 tax cuts permanent, but said that deeper spending cuts would be necessary to cut the federal deficit, and sided with Elon Musk, who earlier that day announced that he was leaving the Trump administration after spearheading efforts to slash the federal government. The tech billionaire announced his announced departure came a day after CBS released part of an interview in which Musk criticized the centerpiece of Trump's legislative agenda by saying that he was disappointed in what the president calls his big, beautiful bill. Musk described it as a massive spending bill that increases the federal deficit and undermines the work of his Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, and says that he thinks that a bill can be big or it can be beautiful, but I don't think it could be both. Speaking to reporters Thursday just ahead of his comments during the Iowa GOP fundraiser, said that he's kind of with Elon on this. He said that he would approve cuts proposed by DOGE to curb spending, but even then, the savings found thus far are insufficient. So Musk's DOGE team initially set out to slash about $2 trillion. DOGE has reported coming up with closer to $200 billion in cuts. And so that's where Paul comes in and talks about how he thinks that these cuts that are outlined in the tax policy bill are wimpy and anemic. He also went on to say that he believes everything needs to be looked at when it comes to reducing federal spending, including entitlement programs, and not just Medicaid, but Medicare and Social Security as well, saying that these entitlement programs, quote, soak everything up, They're mandatory kind of welfare programs that make up more than half of federal spending. And so he said, when you're looking at trying to cut a federal deficit that stands at what is it, like $36 trillion, or to cut the federal debt of around $36 trillion, that right now what's proposed in Trump's big beautiful bill is just nibbling around the edges. And then if you seriously want to curb federal spending, again, you have to look at Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security, since that's a bulk of where federal spending goes. He also said that he would not support Trump's sweeping domestic policy package unless the Senate removes a provision to raise the nation's debt ceiling by $5 trillion as part of that overall package. He warned that the measure would add trillions in new borrowing with minimal offsets and undermine conservatives' commitment to fiscal responsibility. So he said he told the president he's a no unless they separate or take out that debt ceiling provision.
Yeah, and that raises a good point, that as we talk about this bill, it's important to remember that it's just as passed the House, it still has to go through the Senate, which has a much different kind of hurdles to get through with the filibuster rule. And Tom, you nailed it. National debt is right between 36 and $37 trillion. Well done. One more thing that we covered this week that I wanted to talk about before we sign off, and it's not big beautiful bill related, but more local. Sarah covered one of the latest legs of Tom Vilsack's tour of the state with the Iowa Democratic Party. Vilsack is trying to help Iowa Democrats talk to and connect with rural voters. Vilsack, of course, is the former Iowa governor and former USDA secretary. Sarah, how was I covered? I think it was the very first one, for sure, one of the early ones here in Central Iowa. How was the event that you covered?
Well, joke's on you, because he did talk about the big beautiful bill.
Oh, he did. There we go.
That was like
It
a
all
small
ties
part of it.
together.
I think
It counts, though.
I read some previous coverage, and he did talk about some of those other things, like regenerative farming practices
Yeah.
with anaerobic digesters, and looking for expanding markets for rural Iowans, rural Americans. So he did talk about that, but he also talked about how Democrats can talk about cuts to social safety net programs, like cuts especially to supplemental nutrition assistance program, SNAP, and how that if there's fewer people who are going to the grocery store with SNAP benefits to buy food, he said that about 20 cents for every dollar of food sold in grocery stores goes to farmers. And so if there's fewer people buying food at the grocery stores, that means farm income will go down. That means everybody in the supply chain would be affected. So, grocery store income would go down, that could impact jobs along in grocery stores, for people shipping food, for people packaging food. So he said that he thinks Democrats should really connect the dots on some of these issues, when you're talking about cuts to SNAP, that really does impact people who are not SNAP benefit recipients. It can impact the availability of food for anyone, and affect income for these other segments of the economy that you might not think about. So that's kind of that's the connection to the big beautiful bill that he made. And then he also talked about how Democrats can talk about just improving the economy around rural communities. And so, for example, I think his line has been making the farm work harder, not the farmer,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
implementing measures like anaerobic digesters that can make turn hog manure into methane, which can be sold to natural gas producers, and other creative solutions like that. He did not talk very much about ethanol. That was not part of his presentation, but I asked him about it afterward, and he is one of the Democrats of the minds that ethanol is still critical to Iowa's farm and agricultural economy.
And forgive me if you said and I missed it, Sarah. What was I'm curious what the turnout was for that event.
Yeah, there's maybe about 15 to 20 people.
Yeah. Okay.
It was 10:30 this morning. So it was a lot of folks that kind of the typical people you see at Democratic events. And so I think his message was really tailored toward people who are leaders in the party, who are candidates running for office. And he encouraged people to ask candidates about what their plan is for reducing the decline of smaller farms and of acres available as farmland, and in general, reducing the rural decline. So, yeah, so it seemed like his message was like, all right, you guys are very involved in the Democratic Party. You're leaders in your communities. This is, what I think you should be talking to the candidates who are running for office about.
There you go. All right. Excellent. Thanks to everyone and all of you during a busy time on a busy day. Great stuff. To everyone listening, go check out these stories. Find Maya's story on the Ernst Town Hall, Sarah's coverage of Miller Meeks and Vilsack, Tom's coverage of the of Hinson, and then of the Google announcement, which turned out to be a little bigger deal than we thought it was going into it. The reason Jared isn't here is because he's covering Randy Feenstra's event. Make sure you check out that story. Been a busy finish to the week and a lot of good coverage out there that we hope you all check out. That'll do it for this episode of On Iowa Politics. If you're not already, subscribe to us on your streaming service of choice or on YouTube, where you can smash that like button as well. And you can find the podcast each and every week also on your preferred Gazette or Lee newspaper website. Now that you listen to the On Iowa Politics podcast, make sure you're also subscribed to the newsletter of the same name, where every morning in your inbox, you'll receive all the latest politics and government coverage from our team. You can subscribe to that free newsletter at the Gazette's website, thegazette.com. And all those stories I just told you about, they are on the pages and websites of the Quad City Times, Muscatine Journal, Cedar Rapids Gazette, Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier, Mesa City Globe Gazette, Council Bluffs Daily Nonpareil, and the Sioux City Journal. For Tom, Barton, Maya Marchel, Hoff, Sarah Watson, and our producer, Bailey Cheon, I'm Erin Murphy. Be well, everyone, and be good.